Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see so many familiar names on the list there. Today, we are talking about internal stakeholders, a topic that is important no matter what phase you are in your career, managing those internal stakeholders. And with us, we have the illustrious Dan Simon. Dan is a writer, entrepreneur, and financial communications expert. He is a longtime finance nerd, has worked with brands including Morgan Stanley, Bloomberg, Goldman Sachs, just to name a few. He is the chairman at Vested and the CEO at Quoted. He is also the author of The Money Hackers, which was published in 2020 by HarperCollins, the chair of the Museum of American Finance Communications Advisory Board. And most importantly, a financial narrative founding member. Dan has been a regular columnist for Forbes, Cointelegraph. He's been on Cheddar TV, FinTech TV, Asset TV, you name it. He's done an appearance there. And we are very grateful to him for sharing his knowledge. This is a presentation he's given, training that he's given for quite a long time. And I know that it is a great one that has been widely requested by our membership. So welcome, Dan.
Wow, what do I say after that intro? Thank you so much. I know we've only got an hour, so let me just get stuck right in, if that makes sense. I want to leave time for questions because usually this elicits some questions. Welcome, everybody. I can't see anyone, but I'll trust that there's some people on the other side of the screen. I hope you find this useful. As Ashley was saying, I've been doing this presentation for a long time. It initially started, my background is in agency world, and I gave this initially to my team, thinking about their clients as the stakeholders. And then I actually ran this for about 8 years at an organization called Media Bistro. And the people that attended were about 50% agency people and 50% in-house people. And the in-house people got as much out of it as the agency people. What I realized is that there's very little difference between an agency individual maybe treating you like a client, if you're an in-house person, and you thinking about your internal stakeholders, perhaps the business people that you face off against, and the people you're trying to keep happy. So this kind of works for everybody, and I'll try and keep both audiences in mind as I go through. Let me just share my screen. Okay, good. When I did this for Media Bistro, it was a 4-week session at about 2.5 hours per. So it's about a 10-hour presentation or a 10-hour training course that we're going to condense down to about 40 minutes. So I'm really just going to hit some of the highlights. Why did I put this together? I put this together because I had team members who, and perhaps you've heard a version of this conversation, would come to me and say something like, I just don't get it. The client or the internal client isn't happy. And I don't know why. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm delivering everything that I'm supposed to be delivering. But I just can't seem to break through. I just can't seem to get them happy. And as nothing focuses your mind on a problem like the potential for insolvency if you don't come up with a solution. So that's probably partly why I've spent so much time thinking about this, because for an agency, this stuff is pretty existential. So this is some of the stuff we're going to go through, and I'll dig right into it. I think what's ironic about stakeholder or client relationship management is it's not what we went to school for. I imagine most of the people on this call are kind of liberal arts people, or maybe you had a marketing degree or a communications degree, some background in that world. Nobody put you through a degree of kind of interfacing with other human beings and managing them and their expectations and delivering for them. But I'm sure you will probably discover, especially the more senior you become in your role, that becomes the vast majority of what you do every day. So you go to school for one thing, or maybe you start your career doing one thing, and now as you elevate your career, you're doing something completely different. And this becomes like a really important part, but there's no formal training and there's no formal structure around about how to manage people, how to serve people, and how to work for internal stakeholders and clients. But it's so important to get it right. Why? Well, because the first thing that you need to break out of is thinking that you work for example, the agency. This is what I tell my team all the time. I don't hire you. I may have, maybe my name on the employment form or on the check, but the reality is it's the client that hires you. It's the client that pays you. And if unfortunately the clients don't like you, none of the clients like you, it'll be the client that fires you. And the same is true kind of for in-house roles too. Your stakeholders, the business people, are the ones that really are doing the hiring. The communications or marketing team just happens to be the conduit through which they're doing that. So, getting this stakeholder management aspect of your job right is well worth it. It'll also help you control your time. I think one of the things that I developed this for is because I want to save my junior team members time in their lives. I want to give you back control of your life. If you have poor client relationship management or stakeholder management, one of the things that you can often feel like, and maybe if I say this out loud, if you feel it yourself, then this presentation's for you, is you feel a bit like your life is being run by somebody else. And you're just, every now and again, a client or a stakeholder says jump and we have to say how high. But if that feels like 90% of your life, and you're just running around. Have you ever seen two really good or perhaps one really good tennis player, and they're sort of being very small with their movements, but the person at the other side is having a run back and forth at the end of the end of the court? Well, that's what it can feel like sometimes, that we're just running backwards and forwards and we're sweating and we're trying to hit the ball. I want to make you like the really excellent tennis player. I want you to be the one really in control. So I want you to be able to control your stakeholders' priorities and your workload better. If you're in the agency world, good stakeholder management will help you sell more. But what's worth just remembering is that, while some people are naturally better at it than others, it is a technique that you can learn. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the obvious mistakes that we fall into and some of the things that can help you as you go through. It's just worth saying that the other thing that people tend to get wrong is this idea about deliverables and relationship. What I hope you take away from this presentation today is that it's the relationship that matters the most. The deliverables are the conduit to the relationship. And that's often counterintuitive to the way that most people think, right? Most people think it's like, I need to have a good relationship with the stakeholders so that I can get deliverables done, right? I need good relationships with the business people inside the firm so that I can deliver my marketing goals or deliver my communications goals. The reality is actually the opposite. The deliverables are just the excuse to begin the relationship. Or another way of putting it is what I say is deliverables are where the relationship begins, not where it ends. So I'll give this example. This is where things tend to go off the rails with relationship management from the very beginning. And I'll give this example from the agency side, and then I'll flip it for the in-house members of the team, because it's the same problem. So typically, unless you sold, let's talk agency, unless you sold a client yourself, and let's face it, I go and sell clients, and then I turn around to a larger group of people and say, good news, I've sold the client. Typically, that mandate gets handed down to you as a mid-level marketing or comms person as follows. I just sold Bloomberg and they want content, right? I just sold Bloomberg and they want content. So go do content. That is setting you up as an agency team to fail. Why? Because there's no such thing as Bloomberg. There are the people inside Bloomberg. Bloomberg doesn't exist as a living, breathing entity. It's a collection of individuals. So I've told you nothing about the individuals, and they want content, maybe what's written on the SOW, but it reflects nothing about what they actually want. And by the way, the same is true if you join an in-house team and you're now the mid-level marketing person or senior marketing person working for the CMO, and you get a mandate like, I just sat down with the CTO's office and they want a blog series to help us attract better tech talent. And again, there's no CTO's office, and the blog series doesn't tell you anything about what the real mandates are. So quite often, you're walking into a situation, you're walking into a mandate where you have no idea who the individuals are, and you have no idea what the real motivations are and the real deliverables, the true deliverables, not the reflected deliverables, the true deliverables. And so I say, unless we establish, who we're actually working for and what good really looks like for them, we can't begin to deliver effectively. And so if I go back to that first moment that I said at the beginning, when people came to me early on and said, I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm doing everything I was supposed to do. You told me we were working for the tech office, the CTO's office, or the HR team, and we've got to get a blog series, and I'm crushing it on all of that, and no one's happy, or my key stakeholder isn't happy. It's probably because of this problem. You were probably handed down a mandate. You didn't understand who you were working for. You didn't understand what they really, really wanted. And so that's typically where you see this divergence between the stated goals and what's really happening with the relationship. So, what we're going to talk about in a second is to think about the individuals you interface with and to think about their multitudinous, sometimes contradictory needs. And we're going to think about the collection of people that you work with. And then we're going to talk about personalities and how to interface with personalities. So, this is a classic image. If you've ever sat on this training with me, it's basically the way I see the world when I'm interfacing with my clients and when you should be interfacing with your internal stakeholders. It's that, all of us walk around with divergent and sometimes utterly contradictory needs and drivers. And what we tend to do is we tend to just talk about the stuff in the left-hand column. So this is how we talk. We say we want to drive the overall profile in the market. We want to build a messaging platform. We want to better leverage client testimonials. We want to drive sales. What we rarely ever say is, I'm trying to impress my boss. What your stakeholder or your client internally will rarely ever say is, I'm trying to impress my boss, or I'm shooting for a big job and I'm competing internally, with so-and-so over in that group for that job. And I'm trying to, or I just had a kid and I'm trying to actually figure out a way to do less for the moment. And until you understand those things, you can't really begin to succeed. And the interesting thing is that when you sell an account, as a salesperson, myself, the salesperson who secured the mandate typically understands these drivers, whether they were expressed outwardly, whether they were explicitly discussed or just implicitly discussed. The salesperson understands that. But what typically happens is when we hand it over, we just talk about the stuff on the left-hand side because we don't spend the time to really query the conversations that we had and what was expressed under the surface. I did a pitch years ago, and I had a call with the CMO, and she was lovely, and she loved me, and we had a really great conversation, a really great rapport. And then we went into the meeting in Chicago, and I was sitting with the CEO and the CMO, and we were talking about how responsive we were and how hard we would work and we'd be all available on the weekend. And the CMO character began to try and sabotage the meeting during the pitch. And I thought, this is strange because this is someone that I had a good rapport with previously. And I realized afterwards that this was a situation where actually she was trying to control the CEO, and also trying to control her workload, trying to control her time. She was a recent new mother. And all of this talk that I was giving in front of the CEO of high availability, call me any time of the night, call me on the weekends, was running counter to her needs. And we had sort of hashed that out afterwards. You'll be very lucky if the best clients, internal clients or external clients that you have, are the ones who talk freely about the stuff on the left-hand column and the stuff on the right-hand column. Some of my most demanding clients have been my favorite because at least they talk about the stuff that they say to you. They say, it's really important you get me this deliverable because it's good for the firm. And here's how it's really good for me. And this is what it'll mean for me if you do this. Rarely will they do that. And I often think about why. Why is it that despite the fact that we're this sort of melange of different drivers and different needs, why do we typically stick to the stuff on the left-hand side? Part of the reason, I think, is just corporate culture, right? And I think maybe this will change now that we're sort of post-COVID and we're not all going into offices every single day. But certainly if you picture a sort of midtown dropped ceiling office, it is not a conducive place. It's not designed to have personal conversations. Everything about an office environment is designed to kind of keep you focused on the KPIs and keep you talking about the business objectives and the team goals, and be very stripped down of any kind of human emotion. And so in many ways, offices, I think, are big machines of stripping feelings out of discussions. And they're very effective at it. But for you as a stakeholder manager, for you as someone who has to be able to deal with both the stuff on the right-hand column and the stuff in order to be successful, that can work to your detriment, right? So we'll talk about this, but I mean, things that you can do to try and, firstly, you've got to earn the trust of the person, and then maybe think about getting them out of the physical space. Think about finding a place where you can have conversations with them. Because what you're trying to communicate to the stakeholder is that you understand them as a whole person. You will meet their needs on the left-hand column, and you will meet their needs on the right-hand column. And so just again, we could spend hours on each one of these slides, and there are whole exercises we can do, but we don't have all that much time. So I'm going to tab over and start talking about personality. One of the things that I think will help you get to this place where you're getting them to open up and express, build a rapport is obviously this personality matrix. Now, most of you or most people will be familiar with Myers-Briggs, which is a very effective personality analysis tool, but it's incredibly complicated. Even I, after being exposed to it for a very long time, can't remember which series of letters I am supposed to be. This, on the other hand, is much less accurate, but it is much more quick. And I think if you are walking into meetings, with people that you're meeting for the first time, this is the tool to use. So this tool breaks all personalities down into 4 types: drivers, expressives, amiables, and analyticals. Drivers are typical kind of CEO, kind of not very emotional, very, very focused on the results. Expressives, I have been accused of being an expressive, bouncy, kind of very creative, high energy, right? Amiables, those are the people that we all know there's always someone that remembers everybody's birthday and brings the cake around, right? So this is the person who's sort of very soft, index is very high on cooperation and culture. And then there's analytical. Maybe you find them in the finance department or the accounting department, and they are, extremely detail oriented. Now, the interesting thing about this is people often share traits in the boxes next to them. So I am, by the way, when I do this test multiple times over, I'm an expressive driver. right? That is quite bouncy. I'm quite bubbly, quite creative, but every now and again, I put my CEO hat on and I go, all right, enough tomfoolery. What are we doing? What's the results? What time are we doing that? Poor Ashley Jones has witnessed this more times than she might like. She's like, I thought you were being all expressive. And I'm like, no, I'm being a driver right now. Okay. You often see drivers who are analytical. That's your sort of very classic CEO character who's maybe come out of an accounting background, extremely detail oriented, no humor whatsoever, not expressive, just really focused on the details and getting it done. You see analytical amiables, those people, because again, sometimes the people who are remembering people's birthdays or bringing the cake around do work in the accounting department. So they are people who are very detail oriented, but index very highly on the warm and fuzzies. And you see amiable expressives, who are kind of warm, fuzzy, index highly on culture, and they're very, very expressive too. So you typically will get on very well with people in boxes that you share, and you may get on well with people in boxes who are next to you. Where you will struggle as a personality, and by the way, I want to stress, as with all personality analysis, there's no moral judgment, right? Not one of these people. You get an even distribution of lovely people and absolute assholes in each one of these boxes, right? So this is nothing to do, not one of these is any better than anyone else. And by the way, a good organization, a highly functioning organization, needs a healthy mix of everyone. An organization built exclusively of expressives will be the most fun and creative place to work for about 3 days until they go out of business. An organization full of drivers is great, but no one wants to work there. Analyticals, will count the pennies, but there's no creativity. And amiables are, again, very soft and lovely place to work, very bubbly, but probably underperforming as a business. You need these personality types, in a fair mix to be able to operate as an organization. But where you will struggle, especially if you index highly in one of these corners, right? People can, and there is a test, we can share it, which you can do. You might find yourself very highly in the expressive corner, very highly in the driver corner, very highly in amiable, analytical. Where you will struggle is if you face off against people who are very highly in the corner opposite you. So that is to say, expressives don't particularly like analyticals, or they struggle with analyticals. I know this myself, right? I sit down in meetings and the client is an analytical. So what do they think of me and what do I think of them? I'll have to, usually this is a session that we do as groups. So I'll have to fill in, this is the call and response portion. I'll just fill it in myself. Well, hopefully you're thinking to yourself, analyticals see me as a smartass or full of shit or, a bullshit artist or, just all what they would say in the UK, all mouth and no trousers, right? Just creative, but with no eye for detail. How do I, as an expressive, typically see analyticals? No creativity, just a bean counter, and just getting in the way of us being able to do really cool and exciting things. So there's a tension there. How do drivers and amiables look at one another? Amiables are probably terrified of drivers. And they also think that they're heartless, and they think that they don't understand the culture of the organization. And drivers probably see amiables often do as kind of wastes of space, unnecessary headcount that doesn't deliver to the bottom line. And so I think, one of the things that you need to be aware of is firstly understanding kind of who you are when you do this test. And if it helps you to do a Myers-Briggs kind of style of this, that's fine. If you have a really good idea of who you are, however you get to it, that's fine. The reason I like this is because it's quick. Yes, you lose something in the accuracy, but it's very easy, particularly for me and my team, to go in to a meeting and say, what did you think of Sue what was Sue? Well, she was an analytical driver, right? And it gives you a set of language that you can share very easily. It's much easier than saying she was a TGJ, right? So this is less accurate, but very easy to get. If you are highly expressive, think about going into a meeting with an analytical. What are you going to have to do? Well, for me, as a highly expressive person, I tone everything down. I don't bring the most creative ideas up front. I also remember to bring the spreadsheets. And it doesn't matter if I keep them in my bag and never need them, but I'm going to get asked about the spreadsheets by the analytical or the analytical driver. So I go into that meeting prepared. I tone myself down and I focus on the details, right? Now, that's different than if I get a meeting with another expressive, because then we just get to bounce off the walls and, yeah, I love that idea. And we whiteboard stuff together and it's really, really fun. That's great. You will find that. You will find that as an analytical, you will sit and really enjoy the company of other analyticals. But as an analytical walking into an expressive, do not pull out the PowerPoint deck and go, oh, if you could just turn your PowerPoint to slide 67, because you're going to kill an expressive's energy. Same with drivers and amiables, right? As a driver myself, as an expressive driver, I have CEOs or CMOs or people that I have to interface with who are amiables. So what do? I spend the first 10 minutes talking about our kids. Do I want to? No. As an expressive driver, I have a place for my kids and it's not in that meeting. I'm excited to talk about new ideas and I'm probably excited to get on with it. But I force myself because an amiable is going to want to have that preamble. They want that conversation. And if I don't slightly modify myself to be who that person is, we're just not going to get on. So understanding kind of, what your personality is and the personality of the person on the other side of the table from you will help you get to this place, understanding at least rudimentarily kind of what their individual drivers are and listening to them so that you can begin to communicate that you understand what good looks like. Again, there's a whole session to be spent on this, but let's keep moving. I think the other thing to say is that with stakeholder management, there's very rarely just one person. It's a coterie of people that make the decisions. And only one of them really has to dislike you to kind of make your life very difficult. So, trying to understand, who everybody is on the business side and how they influence, one another should be part of the job. And again, what I'm saying is when you think about this, it's work, right? I got to learn this so that I can understand this. And then I have to matrix it across a team of people inside the organization. It's not what you went to school for. We went to school to learn paid, owned, earned, shared, integrated marketing. We want to execute. We want to get to the deliverables. This is a whole second job. But it's true. I don't have an answer for you. It is a second job, but it's a critically important job. And if you get this part of the job right, the rest of your life will become 10 times easier. Essentially, and I hope there aren't too many of my clients on this call, but what I do for a living, if you think about when I talked about the tennis player who's running around the court versus the tennis player who's just sort of tapping the ball gently, a lot of my career, hopefully, if I'm doing it right, is my clients doing all the work and then coming to me and saying, did I do a good job? And then me saying, yes, but here's how you could improve. And then they say, wow, that's so amazing. Thanks so much. I'll go away and work harder on it next time. You see, that's where we're trying to move you from. If you feel like you're the agent, you're just constantly running around and you just got to do these deliverables. It's never good enough. Where we're trying to get to you, and you'll never quite get there, but he's like the doctor character. Take 2 of these and call me in the morning. And that's why it's worth investing all of this time and energy in this exercise. Because once you master it, yes, it's a second job, but it'll make your first job 1,000 times easier. How do you figure out who's important? How do you figure out what their personal needs are? Get them out of the office, get them in, non-corporate environments, listen to them, try and engage them on personal conversations. You should be in the business. I think the best consultants, I'll use that term for both agency and in-house people that I work with, are constantly trying to meet somebody's boss, right? If they face off against the head of technology for New York, they're trying to meet the head of technology for the US. And then when they meet the head of technology for the US, they are demonstrating their expertise and petitioning to meet the CTO and build relationships further up the chain. It's massive job security. It'll make your life, much easier. Let's talk about delivery. When you are delivering, one of the things that I get asked about a lot is what I call scope creep, or what some people call scope creep, which is where, you start doing something well for an internal stakeholder and they ask you to do something radically different. I'll give you an example of this. You're in the communications team inside a bank, and one of the business heads says to you, I really love the work you're doing for me. We've got our user conference coming up. You seem to know the conference landscape really well. Could you recommend some people that could speak at our conference? And of course, being the great friendly in-house person that you are, you say, I'll put a list together for you, no problem. You put a list of recommended speakers together. They say, this is wonderful. Would you mind reaching out to some of them and seeing if they're available? Time ticks along. Now it's 2 days before the user conference, and one of the speakers, the speaker that you had helped them organize, drops out. And the head of the business turns around and says, you suck, you're terrible. And you find yourself thinking, well, I'm a communications or marketing person. I wasn't supposed to be, I'm not a speaker bureau. I wasn't supposed to be finding this person in the first place. And now I'm being judged against something that I hadn't had a hand in shaping. And so, again, I think when the mandate evolves from the business side, it's usually a good sign. It usually means that they trust you to do more than you were originally supposed to be doing. This works for agency and in-house too. But I think it could be a sign that expectations are not being managed. And really the whole next section is about managing expectations and communicating with the client. When I said earlier that the deliverables are just the conduit for the relationship, this is what I mean. Everything is an opportunity to evaluate this. You should be trying to have this conversation as much as possible daily if you need to. You should be saying, okay, and on any deliverable you're asked to do. Okay, I've heard you. We need to go away and we need to build a PowerPoint deck. Now, how is that going to help you? How is that going to help the firm? Great. Did I get that right? Yes, I did. All right. So everything, when someone asks you to do something that's outside of the remit, it's an opportunity to go back and constantly reevaluate. And you should be in the business of trying to have that conversation with as many people as possible. Some thoughts on best practices, because I think sometimes when I give this presentation, it's a little bit like the Jedi mind trick. I'm saying to you that all it takes is for you to really understand personalities, and then you can manipulate your internal stakeholder or client into seeing you as an amazing strategic consultant. And that's not true. The reality is, too often I see great, smart, talented young people that work for Vested being undermined by basic errors and mistakes. One of the things that I would draw your attention to on this, I always say, is about retaining formality. So my stakeholders and my clients, your stakeholders and my clients, are constantly trying to get me to be more informal. Why? Because we're all taught that it's nice to have a friendly relationship with people and they want to be friends. But I don't want to turn you into a friend. I want to turn you into a consultant. Because people, when things go wrong, people don't want friends. If your hand turns blue, you don't want friends. You want the best doctor. If you get served with a legal case, you don't want friends. You want the best lawyer. When the market drops 60%, you don't want friends. You want the best financial advisor, right? And so I think what happens often is our stakeholders will try and get us to drop some level of distance between us. And maybe this sounds counterintuitive because I'm saying get them out of the office, be friendly, be social, but we drop that level of formality you can be friendly with your doctor, you can be friendly with your lawyer or your financial advisor, but there's still an element of distance between you. And that distance actually is what keeps them safe when things go wrong. And I often see this with staff. I often see it with internal consultants too, is they're very keen. They go, oh, they like me. They want to be my friend. And they're easy. They're very quick to drop that element of formality. For me, that's something that my client needs to earn from me, right? It takes a very long time for me to really drop my semi-formality, with my client, the way I show up in the room, what I reveal about myself, what I'm prepared to let them in on, not because I'm not a trusting person or a loving person, but because, when things go wrong, I'm still trying to project that air of calm, consultative expert who's going to help them. Your client or your stakeholder, when the proverbial hits the fan, they're going to want a real consultant. So don't give that up, too easily. This goes back to what I was saying about the value and reassessing. Every time you create a deliverable, it's an opportunity, or you're talking about a deliverable, it's an opportunity to have that conversation. So, when a client says, I think what we need is X, that's an opportunity for me to say, okay, I hear you. I think we need X, and that's going to help you in the following ways. Did I get that right? Yes. Then use the rule of three that newscasters use. Explain what you're going to do. Great. Okay, I heard you. You think it would be good for you and good for the business, and good for your department, and good for the overall firm if we did the following things. Then you tell them while you're doing it. And then once you've done this, here's that PowerPoint you asked for. Here's that media coverage you wanted. Here's that SEO campaign you were looking for us to execute on. You use that as an opportunity to tack back to the original goals. Too often, I see my consultants that I've trained and grown with, they do the work and then they go, further to our conversation, here's that PowerPoint. Please find attached PowerPoint. Please find attached media coverage. And they're missing an amazing opportunity that's what I mean when I said at the very beginning that the deliverables are just the conduit for the relationship. That's your opportunity. Is this right? Did this meet that previously agreed goal? Because it's not about the PowerPoint. It's not about the media coverage. It's about the relationship. It's about their needs. It's about you becoming the conduit through which their dreams and fantasies get realized. And so this is an opportunity. Every deliverable is an opportunity. And what I see junior people doing, both in-house and agency, which senior and experienced people don't do, is that they fall into the trap of just handing the deliverable over without boxing it, without putting a wrapper around it, without explaining and using it as an opportunity to reassess. Does this meet the previously discussed goal? You know, years ago, people may have remembered the magic of Macy's. And magic was actually an acronym that they gave people on the floor when they were trying to sell you, you know, clothing or apparel or whatever. And I think it's really appropriate here. It's magic stood for meet and make a great connection, ask really smart questions, give amazing advice, inspire to buy, and close. And inspire to buy would be like, you know, wow, I think if you had this dress at that party that you just told me about, you'd look really fabulous and everyone would look at you. You know, that's the inspiration to buy. And I think about the magic acronym and the inspiration whenever we talk about deliverables. You know, I think if we had a good PowerPoint that really, or a great deck that your prospects or your sales, we could really empower the sales team with this. Wouldn't you agree? Do you think that's something that you would really like? Testing a fantasy of what that deliverable could achieve for them and for us. And then close. Good. Okay. So I have your permission to go away and execute on that. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to tell you I'm doing that. The biggest mistake, one of the biggest mistakes I see junior people making, and this is the last thing I'll say, because I know we're on the 45 minutes and I want to take questions. The biggest mistake is that then, because people index for deliverable and not for relationship, they go away and they're so busy delivering, they forget to tell the internal stakeholder or the client that they're delivering. How many times has that happened? You go away, you go, okay, I'll go work on that thing. And then a week later, you get an email from the client or from where are we with this? And it doesn't matter what you say next, it's going to sound phony. Oh, I was just about to email you. We were just working on it, right? Don't be so busy doing it that you forget to communicate. You do it because you think that the deliverable is the most important thing. The relationship is the most important thing, and the deliverable is just a means to an end for the relationship. So with that, you know, and again, there's a lot, like I said, there's sort of 10 hours of stuff. You know, I'm sure if people want me to run this, I've run this for internal teams. So if you've got, you know, if you're sitting here as a CMO or someone in a capacity like that, and you'd like me to come and do a longer form version for your team, you know, we can absolutely do that. But I'll leave it here and throw it open for any questions. Ashley, I don't know if that's a good place to pause and use the time that way.
That's just perfect. Thank you, Dan. I know a lot of us have taken a lot of pointers from this and lots to think about. Everybody, I have a few questions that have already been submitted to me privately, but if you have questions, please feel free to submit them to the chat, either publicly or privately, or if you want to use the Q&A section, feel free. But we'll go ahead and start with, so you talked a lot, Dan, about the personality types and managing those various personality types. Talk to us about how you can deal with it when you are sitting in a room with kind of a good mix of those personality types. How do you cater to all of those needs at once?
It's a great question. It's a really great question. I mean, typically any room, and this is when I say the decision cluster, any room has, you know, an alpha. You know, we're still very kind of animalistic in that regard. We still, you typically have somebody in that room who is the decision maker. And I think that goes back to what I was saying about the decision cluster, which is that sometimes it's not always obvious kind of who makes all the decisions, who influences the decisions, right? Sometimes it's not the obvious person. Really great leaders tend to think about what their subordinates want, right? So for me, you know, I can't neglect the people that work for the CCO or the CMO exclusively, because actually sometimes, quite often, in fact, if they're any good, the CCO and the CMO says, really, I leave those decisions to these people. And if I just pander to that senior person in the room, you know, I'm not winning any points with that person. And I'm losing a lot of points with the people that are actually the real decision makers, because this person has delegated the decision making to them. So it's a delicate balance, and it's a hard it's a hard thing. I mean, I do find myself as a consultant, if you've got a room of 5 people, quite often you're ignoring 1 or 2 people. You just are. You just, and that's something that you have to, and it's a bet. Sometimes it's a bet. I've definitely been in rooms where I've ignored the wrong person and paid the price for it. So.
Got it. We've also got a question, I think going back to, you shared a little bit about consultants versus agents. And we had a question submitted about how do you transition if you're kind of already an established relationship, making that transition?
It's hard, I think. But I think one thing I would just say about agents and doers, and I want to be really clear because we've got people at different levels of their career. I always start with doing. I use an expression, I don't know whether it's common, but it's you got to give the client what they want before you can give them what they need. So that's often this idea about want versus need. As a consultant or as as an in-house person trying to consult with your business side, you want to be in the business of giving them what they need. That is to say, they say, I want a press release. And you say, you don't want a press release, you want to drive sales. And a press release isn't going to drive sales. What we need is blah, 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 right? I almost always start from the position of you've got to give them what they want first. Because again, if you're indexing for the relationship, telling someone they're stupid from the get-go and that you're not going to do what they've asked you to do is not a great strategy for building a relationship, right? So typically, I do the thing that's asked, right? We just go through that. We'll do it. We'll do that. Absolutely, we'll do that. And it's yes and. It's not no. It's yes and. Yes, we'll do that. And you know what else we could do is we could do a little paid campaign just to see if, because I think that what you're trying to get is blah, 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 right? So for those people who were like, ugh, I'm a doer, I do a lot of stuff, how do I transition? The first thing to say is that you're in the right place to begin with. You know what I mean? It is a journey, but like if you're doing what people are asking you to do, that's a great place to begin. And I will say, of course, if you're a year into your career, you're just going to end up doing a lot of stuff. And that's okay, because you probably, you're basically being paid to learn. And, it's a journey. But I do think that, some things that you can do, I think, we in communications and marketing, again, tend to think that's our specialty. We don't do finance. Finance is what the business people do, and we do the marketing piece. And I think if you take that mindset, you're going to be disappointed, and you're also going to be career limited. You're just not going to go very far. I am an English and French literature major. I had no business writing a financial book. Certainly not as my first book. If you'd looked at me at 18, you said, what's this guy going to write, a romance novel or a book about finance? You wouldn't have said, oh, he's going to write a book about finance. The reason that I wrote a book about finance, the reason that I've spent my career focused on finance and learning as much as I can about it is because there's no rules that say you can't know more than your client about the thing that they do. And in fact, the more you know about the topic, and again, maybe finance isn't for you in the long term. Maybe you want to go work in healthcare, or you want to go work in biotech, or you want to go work in technology. But be as expert as you possibly can in whatever the area is, because if you're interfacing with a business side, they don't care about marketing and communications. They want you to talk about outcomes. They want you to talk about the market. They want you to talk about sales. They want you to talk about their customer base. They want you to really understand. And as a junior person, if you're wondering, what can I do to kickstart my career? Well, one of the things that you can do is learn as much as you can about the topic of the business that you happen to be working in. Of course, everybody on this call works in banks and asset managers, and it's all finance, which is fine. But I'd give the same advice to people who are working in healthcare companies or pharma companies or technology companies. As marketers and communications professionals, the value of our functional skill sets, I hate to tell you, is going to zero. There is very little to be gleaned in knowing, if you think about what Wix has done to website creation, you know what I mean? like, or hopefully what Quoted is doing for the earned media space, or what LinkedIn and Facebook have done for our ability to spin up targeted ads very quickly. You know, the things that you went to school to study probably are not, will probably be a drag and drop feature for some amateur, you know, within 12 to 18 months. Sad as that is to admit. So what are you left with? Well, you're left with expertise, consulting, knowing more about it. So if you don't want to put that work in, get your Series 7, get your SIE, get your banking, whatever, CFA, God forbid, you know, whatever it is, you don't want to sit down and read The Economist every week, then go do a different job, because you will just not make it inside the organization. There will just be, if you say, I don't know anything about that, but I can tell you about press release, I can tell you about formatting of a PowerPoint, I can tell you about how to set up an SEO campaign, you will just put an inherent cap, you know, on your growth as a consultant.
That's great. That's great. And we just have a second. We're going to take one more because several people have commented on the same subject. This communicating about deliverables, even if you're not delivering the deliverable. Several people have confessed to being guilty of not doing the communication until they have the deliverable. Can you share an example of how you've done that in a way that is stakeholder valued? So not just, you know, kind of bugging your client or your stakeholder with, oh, I'm working on it, but that does seem valuable to them.
I don't know what's wrong with telling them you're working on it, to be honest. Just to refute the premise of the question a little bit, that's literally what I'm talking about. You know, I mean, obviously you don't have to be like, you don't have to say it in that voice, Ashley, you know, you know, you might write something like, hi, Bob, you know, I just wanted to follow up on our meeting last week about the PowerPoint. The team is making some progress. You know, I should have something to show you early next week. Right. You know, it just, you know, because what's happening, right, is that they're thinking, I bet you forgot. And I say this, I typically say this with all, I say, imagine from the agency perspective, I say, you think that your clients are difficult, but I promise you, the minute you purchase anything, you become an asshole. Right? Like no one goes to the mechanic and thinks, oh, I bet this guy's going to do a bang up job with my car. And he's probably going to be very reasonable with his prices. You know, when I go to the barista at Starbucks or whatever, my first thing is like, how are you going to screw up my order? Right? I bet you're going to forget. I bet you're going to get my name wrong. There is something about the act of opening your wallet that just turns you into an irrational being. And it's the same when you're buying things internally. You know, they said they were going to go do this for me. Nobody walks around thinking, oh, I bet they're working very hard on it. We all go through life skeptical, cynical, thinking like that person's going to screw this up. And so that's the arbitrage opportunity, because then they're absolutely delighted to when your mechanic sends you a message and says, hey, just want to let you know we're working on the car, and actually it's probably going to come in under budget. Like, that's the mechanic you're going to go to for the rest of your life, right? So it doesn't take much. I'm not trying. Oh, and I think that's maybe partly why people are guilty of it. They think, oh God, I've got to, you know, I've got to do something. I've got to demonstrate something. But again, that's because you're indexing for the deliverables, not for the relationship. Relationships don't need a reason to say, I'm thinking about you. Think about a personal relationship. How nice it is when you get flowers for it being a Tuesday, not for your birthday, right? Or just a message to say, I'm thinking about you. Like, think about it in those terms, in terms of interpersonal human relationships. Don't think about it in terms of corporate deliverables, because that's what's keeping you from sending something. Oh, I've got nothing. I've got no official update on the blah, blah, blah. It's not about that. It's about humans being humans with each other.
All right. Thank you, Dan. And with that, we're going to have to hold on any other questions. We really appreciate you presenting today. I know I found it very interesting, and I'm confident that quite a few of our attendees here did too. If you're not a Financial Narrative member and you would like to become one, the application is on our website. It only takes a moment to fill out. Feel free to reach out to me, Ashley at financialnarrative.org, with questions. We do have our first annual financial narrative awards program going right now. So if you have a great financial marketer in your life, if you are a great financial marketer, or if you have a rising star on your team, don't forget nominations are due August 19th. And we have a tremendous number of upcoming events, including a great panel on ESG, live events in New York and London just posted on the website for September and October, respectively. So get your RSVPs in now. And we are looking forward to seeing you all at upcoming events. Thank you so much.